On the streets of Berlin, Germany, in the early morning hours of September 2, 1955, an ex-Nazi soldier, Karl Wagner, was found naked, face down on the street, mumbling incoherently. He kept repeating the same thing over and over again. His face and body were covered in what appeared to be scratch marks and scars that were years old. He was taken to the nearest police station where he was questioned. A search of his apartment revealed some extremely disturbing things. Something horrific happened during the search as well. This is the interview with Karl, as well as the first-hand account from one of the policemen who searched his apartment. It was translated to English in 1978. Interviewer: what were you doing face down in the street? Karl: trying to drink myself to death so I could die, but I was obviously unsuccessful. Interviewer: tell me why you want to die. Karl: they keep calling me. Interviewer: who keeps calling you? Karl: dead souls. Interviewer: what are you talking about? What dead souls? Karl: the dead souls who exact their revenge. Interviewer: what dead souls? Karl: you know, don't act ignorant. Interviewer: why don't you start by telling me everything from the beginning? Karl: since the war ended I haven't had a full night's sleep. When it started I thought I was losing my mind because I was only getting a few hours of sleep a night. It wasn't until blood was drawn did I realize it was all too real. I remember well the day it all started. It was Saturday morning, August 24th, 1946, and I was sitting in my apartment, smoking a cigarette and drinking coffee, when I heard a knock on the door. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I jumped a little and got up to answer the door. When I opened the door I was surprised to see an old man standing there holding a clay sculpture of what appeared to be some type of grotesque-looking man. Stepped just outside the front door and asked him what he wanted. His response was, "This is for you," as he handed me the clay sculpture, then turned and started walking away. "What is this?" "I don't want this, old man," I said as he walked down the stairs and out of sight. I wasn't in the mood to chase him down, so I took another hit off my cigarette, went back inside and shut the door. "What is this?" "I don't want this, old man," I said as he walked down the stairs and out of sight. I wasn't in the mood to chase him down, so I took another hit off my cigarette, went back inside and shut the door. As I walked back to the kitchen I looked more closely at the sculpture and noticed the detail on it was impeccable. I thought it was ugly though as I set it down on my coffee table and went to cook breakfast. As I walked back to the kitchen I looked more closely at the sculpture and noticed the detail on it was impeccable. I thought it was ugly though as I set it down on my coffee table and went to cook breakfast. I didn't do much that day, went out to lunch later, then to the grocery store. I made it back home around 6 I think. I'd forgotten about the old man and the sculpture until I walked past the coffee table and noticed the sculpture was not there. I shook my head thinking I must have moved it and forgotten. I stopped and thought hard, but couldn't remember moving it before I'd left the house. As I walked into my bedroom I was shocked to see there on my nightstand was the sculpture. Right then I knew for certain I didn't move it because I would have remembered putting it there. I walked over to it, grabbed it, walked into the kitchen and threw it in the trash. As I cooked dinner that evening, I couldn't get the sculpture out of my head. I kept seeing its grotesque face in my mind. As I cooked dinner that evening, I couldn't get the sculpture out of my head. I kept seeing its grotesque face in my mind. I'm not sure what time I went to bed, but sometime later I was startled, awake to my name being whispered from somewhere in the darkness. I immediately sat up and yelled out, "Who's there?" I again heard my name being called out over and over again. I jumped off the bed, ran over to the light switch and turned it on. The whispering immediately stopped. I stood there for a moment, deciding what to do. I'm normally not scared of much, but I was starting to get nervous someone might be inside my apartment. I knew I needed to do a check, so I started walking from room to room, turning on the lights as I did. The kitchen was the last place to check. I reached around the corner, fumbling to find the light switch, but before turning it on I took a deep breath. As I flicked on the light and walked into the kitchen I stumbled backwards and nearly fell over. There sitting on the table was the clay sculpture. As I stood there against the wall staring at it I couldn't believe it. It looked different, like its arms or legs were now in a different position. I wasn't sure though, as its hideous face was what I paid most attention to. The terrifying thought going through my mind was, how the hell did it get out of the trash and onto the table? Again, I thought someone must have entered my apartment, but I'd checked every room, and there was no one. I hadn't checked the front door yet, so I quickly walked over to it to see if it was locked in. It was. I then walked back to the kitchen, grabbed the sculpture, held it up, and said, "What in God's name are you? You hideous looking piece of shit." I walked over to the trash bin, opened it up, and dropped it in. As I stood there looking down at it, I again heard my name being whispered from somewhere behind me and felt something sharp going up my spine. I immediately turned around, swinging my fists as I did, but was baffled to see no one was there. "Who's there?" I shouted. Right then, I heard it again. "Carl, Carl, stop saying my name," I yelled out. I stood there in the kitchen for hours, paralyzed with fear, not sure what to do. Eventually my legs grew too tired to stand, so I stumbled my way to bed and collapsed. I stood there in the kitchen for hours, paralyzed with fear, not sure what to do. Eventually my legs grew too tired to stand, so I stumbled my way to bed and collapsed. When I opened my eyes the following morning, I screamed out as I fell off the bed. I couldn't believe it. There on my nightstand was the sculpture. Right then I felt sharp pain go up my arm. I looked down to see what appeared to be a deep scratch mark going from my wrist to my elbow. There was quite a bit of blood, but it was dry and crusted, which meant it had happened sometime while I slept. I grasped my arm as I stood up. I couldn't take my eyes off of the sculpture as it looked like it was staring at me. I walked to the bathroom to clean and bandage my arm. As I washed off my arm, I was in disbelief as to what was happening. I'd seen some horrible shit in my life, but nothing unexplainable like this. Once my arm was taken care of, I sat down on the bed and just stared at it, its hideous face glaring back at me. It felt like it was staring into my soul. As I sat there on the bed, I thought of 100 ways to try and get rid of that cursed thing, but was beginning to think no matter what I did, it'll come back. I didn't care though. I had to try. After sitting there for a while, I grabbed it and decided to walk down to the river and throw it in to see if I could rid myself of it. When I made it to the river, I took one last look at it and threw it as hard as I could, as I yelled, "Stay the hell away from me." When I made it back to my apartment building, I stood outside, not wanting to go inside for fear that damn thing would be there again. A few minutes later, I walked up the stairs to my door. I took a deep breath as I inserted the key and turned the lock. As I stepped inside, I could see it was not on the coffee table, but I figured if it was back, it'd be on my nightstand. I slowly made my way to my bedroom and didn't hesitate as I turned the corner. I fully expected it to be there, but to my surprise it was not. I breathed a sigh of relief, then went to the kitchen to grab a beer and something to eat. I sat on the couch the rest of the day, getting drunk until I fell asleep. The next thing I remember was all of the muscles in my body tensing up in extreme pain going through my body. I was then shot straight up into the air as I hit the ceiling with such force it broke my nose along several other bones. I was then pulled back down onto the couch and felt like something was holding me down, so I couldn't move. I'll never forget the pain I felt as my entire right leg was repeatedly scratched. I pleaded and screamed out in pain for it to stop, but it did not. I could feel the warmth of my blood as it escaped my body. I eventually passed out from the pain. When I opened my eyes the next morning, I felt like I wanted to die. As I slowly sat up on the couch, I could see there was quite a lot of blood. I could feel my nose was swollen and several of my fingers along with my left arm had been broken. I knew I needed to see a doctor, so I got up and went to my bedroom to get changed. As I entered the room, I fell back against the wall as I screamed out hysterically. There on the nightstand was the goddamn sculpture. "What do you want with me? Leave me the hell alone," I said as I cried out. The physical pain I was feeling was almost too much to bear, so I mustered up the strength, got changed, and went to the hospital that's just down the street from me. It's been like this for years. I've had so many broken bones over the years and lost so much blood I stopped keeping track. Every night they call out to me, then pain is inflicted upon me. I've tried killing myself many times, but either I fail or I lack the courage to do so. It's almost like I'm not permitted to kill myself, like something is stopping me. 2 police officers were sent to his apartment to investigate to see what they could find and to make sure there wasn't anyone else living there. This is the first-hand account, as told by police officer Peter Meyer. We were only given a brief overview of what happened to Mr. Wagner, then were instructed to go search his apartment for anything suspicious and to make sure there was no one else inside that might be injured or in danger. When we arrived at the apartment, the door was slightly ajar. As I put my hand up to open the door, it was like I could feel a presence through the crack of the door. I could also feel what felt like warm, humid air coming through the crack. I looked back at my partner Otto to see if he'd noticed what I had, and could tell by the look on his face he had not. He was looking at me like he was anxious to go inside and was wondering what I was waiting for. I slowly pushed the door open and stepped inside with Otto right behind me. I started scanning the immediate room when I noticed something odd about the couch. It looked white and red, but the red coloring didn't belong. I walked over to it and could see it had mostly been white once, but now it was stained red with blood. The smell of blood in the air was thick as well. It was almost intoxicating, as weird as that sounds. Otto, can you believe this couch used to be white? It's been drenched with blood, I said. What the hell went on here exactly? He responded. Not sure. Nothing good, I replied. As I stood there staring at the couch, Otto continued walking through the living room towards the other rooms. I figured I'd search the rest of the living room, then make my way to the kitchen. I'd walked over to a closet and started going through it when suddenly I heard Otto shriek out in horror. What the? His sentence was cut off. I immediately froze in place. Otto, are you all right? I yelled. Seconds went by with no response. He then screamed again. Peter, help me. I'm coming, Otto, I said as I took off running. The first room I came to was the bedroom, and as I entered the room, I'll never get the image of what I saw out of my head. There on the ceiling with his arms and legs spread was Otto. He was shirtless, and he'd been cut open from his groin to his sternum. His entrails were hanging down, with some of them laying on the bed. Out of the corner of my eye on the ground just under the bed, I saw some slight movement. I crouched down to get a better look and nearly lost my balance as I shouted, Holy Mother Mary of God! There stood the scariest looking sculpture of a man I'd ever seen. It was about 6 to 8 inches high, and I swear on my mother's grave, I saw it move. My thoughts immediately turned back to Otto as I looked up at him, also realizing in that second there was nothing I could do for him. The look of terror on his face is something that will haunt my dreams forever. I quickly turned and ran out of the apartment as fast as I could. Everything was happening so fast I didn't have time to even think. I hopped in the car and drove here as fast as I could. I know you'll think I'm crazy, but I don't care. That's everything I saw. 5 more policemen were quickly sent to the apartment. They arrived at the same horrific sight Peter had witnessed. Otto was still on the ceiling with his insides coming out. It took 3 men to pull him down off the ceiling. They were in disbelief as they couldn't figure out what was holding him up on the ceiling. A thorough search of the apartment was made, and no clay sculpture was ever found. Otto's death was investigated, but nothing ever came of it due to the strangeness of it and unanswered questions. It was determined there was no way Peter could have been at fault. Karl Wagner was declared insane and was sent to an insane asylum. A year later, an old man showed up to the asylum with a hideous-looking clay sculpture saying it was a present for Karl. Karl and Otto were both ex-Nazi soldiers.